Good morning from far out Alaska. I wanted to talk about something this morning that some things you might want to consider, or things that I wish we had considered harder when we set out to build this cabin. Uh, and it's a list of 7 things, kind of general categories, but yeah, I've given this a lot of thought. We're not unhappy with the cabin that we have ended up with, but there's as I go through the process of clearing land and building it, building the cabin and so on, I've come up with a list of my, things I wish I'd have thought a little harder or worked a little harder on in the planning stages. So a couple of these are going to surprise you, um, but I'll just throw them out there. The last one, I know everybody says, be sure you watch till the end because the last one's going to surprise you, but I promise you'll probably be surprised at that one. So let's take a walk around. It's a nice morning. It's supposed to be raining, but it's not. It was earlier. But the first thing I think I would, and this, I really didn't have much control of this, but I think I would start younger. I'm 60 years old, almost 61, and I've been working on this piece of property, this cabin, for about 8 years now, and it has occupied every summer. It has dominated every summer of activities. Before that, we used to do things that, fun stuff around Alaska, fly fishing, lots of, just leisure camping trips, gold prospecting. I was into that for quite 2 or 3 summers, just crazy about trying to find some gold. But now I'm getting older and slowing down a little bit. I'm still pretty active, but I do stuff I probably shouldn't be doing at my age. But yeah, I can see how, if you started when you were 25 or 30, you'd probably have a lot more energy to give the project. Of course, being older gives you some wisdom, too. So yeah, I would, if I could do it over again, which I cannot, I would start younger. I was doing other things when I was 30, following another dream, actually. But okay, item number 2 is I think I would be more picky about the property. We looked at land for a long time, and we thought, price was a major issue, but you get what you pay for. And when it comes to land in Alaska, if you get dirt cheap land, it's gonna take some work to develop it. And yeah, there were some pieces that we looked at before we bought this one that I had the gut feeling. There was one in particular that wasn't far from here, actually, but I just had the gut feeling that was the one, but I couldn't come together with the seller on price and terms, so we passed on that one and ended up with this one. I've kicked myself in the butt ever since, because it all starts with the land. You want to get the best piece of land you can afford, and even if it means not investing so heavily or not having so much resources for the cabin itself, you can't relocate the land. You can't, you buy the land and it is what it is. So I would have, if I could redo purchasing the land, I would probably get something a little more scenic. This area is scenic, but the property we bought is very, very thick and overgrown. It's never been cleared except for a forest fire that happened about in the 30s, so 85 years ago or so. So I would also like to have a piece of land with more hardwoods on it. You can see behind me, it's quite a bit of, this is mostly spruce forest, and spruce is good for a lot of things. Good building material, good firewood, good for privacy because it doesn't drop the leaves in the fall. But yeah, I like birch trees, and I wish we'd have bought an area that had more birch trees. We are bringing over some birch trees. There aren't any in this area, but we are transplanting, so we've got probably 20 birch trees that we've transplanted over the last couple of years. So you can kind of change that, but So the next thing I would probably do differently is well, you got to budget for heavy equipment. You just have to. In Alaska, especially, but even anywhere, living remotely, building remotely, everything revolves around moving heavy stuff, lifting and moving, lifting and moving. And a lot of the stuff is just humanly impossible to lift and move around. Uh, we invested in a tractor a few years ago, and after it was very handy for a couple of years, but then we found we weren't using it because we were so wrapped up in the building of the cabin, the actual carpentry side of things, that I just saw this asset sitting in next to the cabin, and I sold it because the payments, heavy equipment is not cheap. In fact, I would venture to say you'll probably should budget more for the heavy equipment than you would pay for the land, at least in Alaska. You don't get very far without, doing things. We're doing a lot of brush clearing this summer especially, but we're doing it all by hand. Chainsaws, brush cutters, and then you drag it to a fire and burn it or run it through a chipper. But I would start with just heavy equipment and just totally strip the spot where I'm going to put my structures and my driveway. And so heavy equipment. Plan on that. Rent it if you have to, but definitely you will need it. Unless you just want to carve out a little tiny hole in the woods and put a little tiny cabin in. But if you want to, have parking spaces and all that stuff, if you're going to be on the road system, and we've got a 40-foot Connex in here that, that has to sit on a gravel pad. Ground in Alaska is not really conducive to just walking around and putting things on it, and it's very spongy moss. There's about 6 to 10 inches of moss in most places, so it's not even like you'd be setting anything on mineral soil. So we had to spend thousands of dollars just in gravel, having that brought in to do all these structures and parking areas on. So the third or fourth actually category or area that I would do differently is I would start with a smaller and simpler cabin. There really is no, I guess it depends what your plans are, but, this thing behind me, it's not huge. The heated space is 12 by 16, 2-story, but the whole structure it's got an 8-foot porch, so it's 28 feet by 16 feet, and it's kind of massive for 1 or 2 people to build. Unless you have a crew that can come and help put this thing together in a week or two, I would go with, if I had it to do over again, something like a shed, a simple-sized 12 by 16 shed with a little sleeping loft in the top. You don't have to have much of a foundation at all, just some adjustable pier blocks. And we would have been done the first summer with a living, heatable structure if we'd have just gone smaller and simpler. I also would not build anything with a 12-12 pitch roof on it. That was just a nightmare literally a nightmare to build. That's very steep. Not even a squirrel can stand on a 12-12 pitch roof. Anyway, smaller and simpler on the cabin. And got to remember, if you're out here, what are you out here for? Are you out here to recreate the suburban lifestyle or the urban lifestyle that you're living, or are you out here to live simpler? And if the answer is to live simple, then build simple. Out here, you will have a different lifestyle. If you want to try to create the suburban lifestyle way out here, then that's going to cost a lot of money. You might as well just stay in the suburbs. Another, the fifth, I guess, what would it be? 6, I believe. The sixth consideration is that I think what I would do, if I had it to do over again, is I would consider building, I would consider buying a cabin. In Alaska, people they do the dream, they build the dream, they get tired of the dream, they move away, and cabins can be bought pretty cheap. up here. And they're not going to be in fantastic shape when somebody's doing that, but at least you've got a start. So yeah, we've spent as much on this cabin as we would have if we would have just bought an already built cabin that someone had. You know, you don't want to buy any junk because there's certainly that, and you want it to be safe. But yeah, I think I would consider at least buying a cabin, small, simple cabin that someone else had already done most of the work for you on. Another thing I would do is I would consider, you know, we're on the road system. It's a nice, quiet country road. We have I mean, there's some days where hours go by and not a single car, but we do have mail service right at the end of the driveway, school bus service if you want it. We're on a state-maintained road, so it's a dirt road, but it gets plowed in the winter. So yeah, we're on the road system, and I thought that's what we really needed. But looking back at it, and having been to and stayed in a few remote cabins, when I say remote, I mean not connected to the road system, I think I would consider that instead as the whole. I mean, if the goal is to get out and get away and have peace and quiet, then yeah, and security too. You got to think if you're on the road system, people can come to your place when you're not there and help themselves to your things. That's why you have to keep things locked up. In a remote cabin situation, there are plenty of land buying opportunities that gives you remote property, and you can either fly out, be flown out, snowmobile in the wintertime, ATVs in the summer, or riverboats can get you to your cabin. But out there, you have no highway noise, virtually no crime, no petty theft or anything. There's really no crime to speak of around here either, but because everybody knows everybody. But I would consider doing an off-the-road cabin if I were to do this again. That is the real deal. That's the real Alaskan experience. And yeah, you've got a budget then for your transportation, how you're going to get there, but that's part of it. Now, the last thing, and probably the most surprising thing that you might hear me say, is that I would consider not even building the cabin. Maybe just purchase the land. We thought about this, we live in our little camper here in the summer when we're working on the cabin, but we keep thinking, well, I kind of, a smarter way to go about it might be to just buy your land, create your parking area, and put an RV on it. If your plan is only to be here in the summertime out like this, then an RV is just fine. You can park it, set it up with, your own facilities. You're basically in your own private campground. And yeah, that, for the money that we put into this little cabin, we could have a very nice Class A RV with full facilities. And in the wintertime, you winterize it, you park it, you store it, and done. So that would be a good way to have the feel of living out here seasonally. You can't live in an RV in the winter. It just doesn't work. I've tried it. It doesn't work. Things get clammy and soggy and condensation. But so I'll have to wrap this up. Those are some of my thoughts on maybe things I would maybe do differently if I were to do this again ever, which I don't think I will. But yeah, thanks for taking a walk with me here in far out Alaska. I got to get to work because I've only got a few days left to get the siding finished on the cabin, and then we'll be done for the year here. All right, thanks for watching.